So good afternoon. Um, I have just been out in the hills and I was running about in the buff. It was pretty pretty fucking awesome. Right, I want to talk about I don't normally address current political situations other than when really necessary. But what I want to talk, like when I'm out driving, I'll stick on Radio 2. And I don't know why I stick on Radio 2 because I always end up screaming at the radio and trying to find another radio channel, but I always end up back on Radio 2. So today on the wonderful Jeremy Vine show, they were having this really bizarre conversation, and this was one of the many things that they were discussing. And they were having this phone in, and they were having a vox pox thing about the fact that the press secretary or something for the United States was comparing Assad in Syria to the Nazis, and all these people were phoning in and they were giving they were given what they thought were intelligent opinions and discussing this in what they thought was an intelligent way. But this is what liberalism, the problem with liberalism is, and this is why we need to be radical as opposed to liberal, because we're having a discussion about something that is, one, completely unnecessary, and two, ridiculous. 2 words, depleted uranium, another 2 words, white phosphorus. Nobody talks about those. Nobody talks about the children that are still being born in Iraq after the first Iraq invasion with their brains on the outside of their skull, their internal organs on the outside of their body. These mutations are going to last for generations and generations and generations to come. Nobody's talking about that. So instead, the liberal media, whatever you want to call it, the mainstream media, allows us to engage in these really stupid and unnecessary conversations. And that what really annoys me and makes me mad and gets me angry and sometimes makes me say stuff that I might regret, because if you don't get mad about this stuff, there's something wrong with you, first and foremost. And if you don't get mad about shit like the fact that 8 million children go missing every year, or there's something like upwards of 60 million people displaced because of war and famine and other things, and we're talking about displacing Assad, and we all know that the reason we're wanting to displace Assad is to do with oil and resources and pipelines, the same thing that all these wars are about. All the wars that we go through are about stealing land, and they're about oil, and they're about pipelines and the control of the economy. So this is what makes me really, really mad, and this is what makes, informs my activism, because, there's no point going on marches, there's no point signing petitions, there's no point being vegan or vegetarian or whatever you want to do unless you're going to actually challenge the systems of oppression that have brought you to where you are in your life. And the reason that you are where you are in your life is because the dominant culture prevented you from growing as a human being. We're all disfigured in a way. I have these conversations about how we treat our children in the dominant culture, and I think this is a really important conversation that we need to have. I don't have any children myself, but I come from a big family, and I've always been about, my relatives, my wee babies and that, and I love it. But the reality is, we're always on the back foot with the dominant culture. It doesn't matter how much love and how much physical security or stability that you're able to offer your child. We're always on the back foot because we're not able to give children what they really need. Because in our culture, what we do is, as soon as a child is born, we take it away from its parent, its mother, right away, first and foremost. For whatever reason, it's taken away. That's traumatic. And then the child, for example, could be born to a career couple, people living in the city. The child, by the time it's like 1 1.5 is going to nursery every day of the week. A ridiculous amount of hours. You know, some of these kids are going to nursery more than full-time hours, 40 hours a week. And they're 2 years old. And that's the beginning of the end. I was speaking to a friend and they said that they have a friend whose child, you know, they're really wealthy, they're out in Berkeley or Oakland somewhere, and their kid goes to like the best schools. The best school that money can buy. Most progressive, most liberal, you name it. It's got it. The kid still hates going. That is what is wrong with our culture. That is why there's no point getting engaged in these superfluous conversations. What are we going to do about our children? How are we going to start raising our children properly? How are we going to build healthy communities? These are the questions that we need to be asking. Not defining arguments and putting a label here and calling this that and call it, because that is just a distraction. Spiritualism is territory specific. Radicalism is territory specific. Do what you can where you are. Start to build healthy communities. Because this is a realization that I've come to quite recently. Is a lot of activism is really, really redundant. And I mean like painfully redundant. And the reason it is because what we should be doing is focusing on our children. We should be focusing on sexual exploitation in our communities. We should be standing in the way of the dominant culture so we can start to raise our children without the influence. We should be challenging legal institutions in the way that we raise our kids. And that is what my activism means to me.